I remember walking into the courtroom that morning, my hands trembling, my heart pounding like it would burst from my chest. I had spent months fighting for what was rightfully mine, yet the moment I stepped through those doors, my son laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a small, embarrassed giggle. A mocking, sharp laugh that cut deeper than any knife. And then, my daughter-in-law rolled her eyes at me as if I was some inconvenient shadow in their perfect little world. I wanted to disappear, but inside, something snapped. I knew this time I would not leave powerless. My name is Robert, and I am 52 years old. I never thought that a day meant to celebrate justice could turn into the most humiliating moment of my life. I worked my entire life, pouring my heart and sweat into a business I built from nothing, hoping to leave something behind for my children. My son Jason had always been distant, but I thought it was normal. I thought he respected the sacrifices I made. I was wrong. Everything I believed about family, loyalty, and love was about to be shattered in the most unimaginable way. I lived in a modest house in the suburbs, the kind where neighbors wave politely and children play safely in the street. My office, tucked in the corner of my home, was filled with dusty ledgers, awards for small business achievements, and a single framed photo of my late wife. She had passed when Jason was only 12, and since then I had tried to hold everything together. I worked twice as hard, hoping that one day my family would recognize my effort. Jason had married Emily 5 years ago, a woman whose smile could light up a room and whose words often cut like glass. At first I welcomed her into our lives. I thought she would bring happiness to my son. I was naive. Emily was cunning, charming, and calculating. From the start, she made subtle jabs that left me second-guessing myself. Small remarks about my clothes, my house, my habits. They seemed insignificant at first, almost comical, but over time they became sharper, more deliberate. I began to realize that she did not see me as part of the family. She saw me as an obstacle, a relic in the way of her control over Jason and everything he had inherited from me. The tension grew quietly for months. I would sit at the kitchen table, pretending to read a newspaper. Jason, my own son, had begun to mirror her behavior, laughing at her jokes that belittled me, avoiding my gaze, rolling his eyes when I tried to offer advice or help. I felt powerless, invisible in my own home. The betrayal stung deeper because it came from the people I trusted most. My own blood had chosen her over me, over the man who had given him everything. It all came to a head when the inheritance dispute began. My wife's small estate, accumulated over decades, had been left to both Jason and me. Emily saw an opportunity to take control of everything, to manipulate my son into signing away rights that were legally mine. I hired lawyers. I spent sleepless nights poring over documents, trying to protect what was mine. Knowing full well that I would have to confront my own family in the courtroom, I can still remember the night before the hearing. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, imagining the courtroom in every detail. The smell of polished wood, the heavy air filled with murmurs, the cold glare of the judge's bench. I felt my stomach twist in knots as I thought of Jason's laugh, Emily's smirk, and the way they had dismissed me as if I were some irrelevant figure from the past. That night, I made a decision. I would not leave the courtroom feeling small, powerless, or humiliated. This time, I would make them understand exactly what it meant to cross me. I rose the next morning before sunrise. The streets were quiet, the kind of cold January morning that makes every breath visible, every footstep echo. I dressed carefully, straightened my tie, and grabbed the leather briefcase that held the evidence, the documents, the proof of every deceitful move Emily had made. My hands shook, but my mind was clear. Today, I would enter that courtroom not as a defeated father, but as a man ready to claim the respect and justice I'd been denied for far too long. If you have ever felt powerless, betrayed, or mocked by the people you trusted most, this story is for you. Hit that like button and subscribe because you are about to witness a battle of justice, patience, and ultimate payback. Stick around because what happens in this courtroom will make you gasp, cheer, and maybe even see the kind of revenge that is perfectly deserved. From the moment I entered the courtroom, I felt it. The air was heavy, thick with anticipation and unspoken hostility. Emily sat at Jason's side, her posture perfect, her smile almost too bright, the kind of smile that promised sweetness while hiding a sting. Jason avoided my eyes completely, his hands drumming nervously on the table. But I could see it in the corner of his mouth, a flicker of mockery, a silent enjoyment in the discomfort he had caused me. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and tried to focus on the facts. On the evidence that would prove what I had suspected all along. Emily had manipulated my son, twisted the truth, and intended to take everything from me. She began her little performance immediately, leaning forward, speaking with practiced sincerity to the judge. Her words were carefully chosen, polished like a gemstone, but I could feel the venom behind them. She painted me as a controlling, bitter father, obsessed with money and past grievances. Every sentence was a calculated blow. I felt my chest tighten, my pulse racing. I wanted to speak, to interrupt, but I knew that losing my composure would hand them exactly what they wanted: the image of me as irrational and desperate. Jason, my own son, chimed in occasionally, echoing Emily's points. He avoided looking at me, pretending he had no idea that I had spent decades working to provide him a future. Every time his voice rose, every time he repeated one of Emily's sly insinuations, I felt a mixture of anger and disbelief. How could the boy I had held in my arms as a baby now side with her over me? I clenched my fists under the table, gripping the edge so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to let the tension build like a storm before it breaks. The judge listened politely, nodding occasionally. But the subtle frown creasing his forehead told me he sensed the tension too. The courtroom was silent, except for the occasional shuffle of papers and the low hum of whispers from spectators. I could hear Emily's laugh, a soft, calculated sound that made my blood boil. Every chuckle felt like a betrayal, every glance between her and Jason a silent conspiracy against me. I kept imagining the moment I would turn the tables, when all of their smirks and laughter would crumble into panic. But for now, I had to endure, to survive their manipulations without showing the storm raging inside me. Every motion they made was deliberate, every word rehearsed. Emily leaned close to Jason at one point, whispering something I could not hear, but their shared grin told me all I needed to know. They believed they had me cornered. They thought they had one before the first argument had even been presented. That is when I felt something shift inside me. Anger alone would not be enough. I needed strategy, patience, the perfect execution. I needed them to underestimate me completely, to think I was beaten. Then, when the moment came, I would strike in a way they would never forget. The tension built minute by minute, each statement and rebuttal adding layers to the suffocating atmosphere. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears, matching the rhythm of the silent gasps from the audience. Every time Jason smirked, every time Emily tilted her head in feigned innocence. I imagined the look of shock and disbelief I would see on their faces when justice finally fell into place. I felt a cold, sharp satisfaction creeping in, even as the courtroom continued its slow, torturous proceedings. And then, just as I was beginning to doubt my ability to endure, the first tiny crack appeared. Emily hesitated over a point, her confident smile faltering for a fraction of a second. Jason looked at her, confused, as if he had never noticed the inconsistency. My heart leaped, and I knew the turning point was approaching. The moment when all their carefully constructed lies and manipulations would unravel was drawing closer, and I would be ready. I had waited too long, sacrificed too much, to let this opportunity slip away. By the time the judge called for a recess, I could feel the pressure inside me reaching its limit. Every insult, every sideways glance, every whispered mockery from Emily and Jason had piled onto me like stones, pressing against my chest. I felt a rage so sharp it burned behind my eyes. I wanted to stand up, to shout, to make them understand the depth of their betrayal. But I knew that would only prove their point. No, this time I needed patience. I needed control. I needed to turn their own arrogance against them. As the courtroom emptied for a brief pause, I retreated to the hallway, my briefcase still clutched tightly in my hands. My mind raced, not with panic, but with clarity. I could see their confidence, their smug smiles, and it ignited something cold and precise inside me. They believed I was powerless, that the old man who had built a life from nothing could not possibly outmaneuver them. That was their first mistake. That was the crack I could exploit. I began to visualize every step of what I would do next. Every detail mattered. I imagined Emily's face when she realized her lies were exposed, when her carefully rehearsed story collapsed in the court of truth. I imagined Jason's disbelief as he understood that he had been manipulated into siding with someone who did not care about him. I felt the satisfaction of seeing their smug expressions replaced by panic, fear, and regret. I let myself savor it, fueling my determination with the anticipation of justice finally delivered. I reminded myself of every slight, every insult, every laugh that had cut me to the bone. I remembered Jason rolling his eyes at me, Emily smirking while dismissing my contributions, and the quiet moments in my own home where I had felt invisible and discarded. Those memories sharpened my focus. I could no longer act as the passive victim. I would reclaim not just what was mine, but the respect they had stolen from me. I returned to the courtroom with a calmness I had not felt before. My steps were measured, deliberate. I could hear Emily whispering to Jason, plotting their next attack. Still unaware that I had already taken control of the narrative in my mind, I smiled inwardly. They had no idea that the old man they dismissed was about to become the force that dismantled their entire plan. I pulled out the first set of documents, carefully annotated, cross-referenced, and impossible to dispute. I did not rush. I did not speak loudly. I let the silence in the room magnify my presence. Every eye was drawn to me, even Jason's, who suddenly looked uneasy. I could see the doubt creeping in, the first hint that maybe, just maybe, they had underestimated me. That doubt was my leverage. The turning point had arrived not with a dramatic outburst, but with a quiet, deliberate assertion of authority. Every word I planned to speak, every document I intended to reveal, was designed to puncture their confidence, to dismantle their facade, to make them question everything they believed about power, control, and loyalty. The psychological game had begun, and for the first time in months, I felt a surge of control so intoxicating it steadied my hands and sharpened my mind. I knew the moment would come when their arrogance would meet reality, and I would be ready. Every smirk, every whisper, every subtle attempt to manipulate me had been a lesson. I would turn those lessons into a meticulously crafted payoff, and when that moment arrived, they would not see it coming. They would not even know what hit them until it was too late. I waited until the judge gave me the signal to proceed. The room was quiet, so quiet that I could hear the soft scratch of a pen from the clerk's desk. My heart was steady now, not calm, not relaxed, but focused. That kind of focus that comes when a man finally stops reacting and starts controlling the outcome. I stood slowly, letting the movement speak before my words did. Emily lifted her chin slightly, as if daring me to fail. Jason glanced at her, then at me, unsure which expression to mirror. I opened my briefcase and pulled out the first folder. Thick, heavy, solid. Evidence always feels heavier than paper. It carries truth, and truth has weight. I placed it gently on the table, letting the sound echo heads turned. Emily's smile tightened just a little. She had not expected this level of preparation. That was the first shift. I began by presenting financial records, not accusations, not emotion, just facts. One explained how certain assets had been transferred without my consent, how signatures had been rushed, how documents had been altered in subtle ways. I watched Emily's posture change. Her shoulders stiffened, her hands clasped together. Jason leaned forward, confusion spreading across his face. That confusion was my second opening. The judge examined the papers closely. Silence filled the room again. That silence stretched. It pressed against Emily like a wall. She cleared her throat too loudly. A mistake. I could almost see the cracks forming in her carefully constructed confidence. I continued, slowly, methodically. I introduced communication records, emails, messages, conversations that showed how Emily had guided Jason, coached him, pushed him, toward decisions that benefited her more than anyone else. I did not accuse her directly. I let her own words do the work. Jason's breathing changed, shorter, faster. He turned toward her, his eyes searching for reassurance. She did not look at him. That single moment said everything. I felt something powerful settle into my chest. Control, not loud, not aggressive. I brought out the next document, a legal affidavit that proved she had misrepresented financial information to influence the inheritance process. Her lawyer shifted in his seat. That was not part of their script. That was not part of their confidence. Emily finally spoke, her voice smooth but strained. She claimed misunderstanding. She claimed clerical errors. She claimed confusion. I watched her hands as she spoke. They trembled slightly. That tremor was my confirmation. The judge raised an eyebrow, just a fraction, but that fraction carried authority. Then I introduced the final piece, The one I had saved. The one that tied everything together. A recorded conversation, legal clear, her voice, calm, calculated, instructing Jason on how to move assets quietly, how to pressure me, how to make me look unstable if I resisted. When the audio played, the room transformed. The air felt heavier. Even the spectators leaned forward. Jason's face drained of color. He stared at Emily as if he was seeing her for the first time. She tried to interrupt. The judge raised a hand, firm, final. The recording continued. Every word, a hammer. Every pause, a verdict forming. I did not look at her. I looked at my son, and in his eyes, I saw something break. Not anger, not hatred, realization, the kind that hurts deeper than betrayal. Emily's mask collapsed, her posture slumped, her lips parted as if searching for an explanation that did not exist. I felt no need to speak anymore. The truth had spoken for me. The judge requested a recess. Emily whispered urgently to her attorney. Jason remained frozen, staring at the table as if it might swallow him whole. I sat down slowly. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. This was not revenge fueled by rage. This was justice delivered through patience. They had laughed at me. They had dismissed me. They had treated me like an obstacle. Now they were facing the consequences of their arrogance. And this was only the beginning of their reckoning. The courtroom returned after recess, and the tension was nearly tangible. Pressing against my chest with every step I took, Emily walked in first, her posture rigid, her smile gone. The carefully constructed armor of confidence she had worn for months had cracked, and now she carried the weight of uncertainty like a stone around her neck. Jason followed behind her, his face pale, his hands shaking slightly as if he had aged 10 years in that single hour. I could feel the satisfaction bubbling quietly inside me, a slow-burning heat that promised closure. The judge began speaking, methodically reviewing the evidence. I watched Emily's eyes dart nervously between the documents, the judge, and me. She tried to maintain composure, but her breathing betrayed her. Each inhalation was shallow, rushed, a subtle testament to the collapse of her control. Jason avoided her gaze completely. I could see the flicker of panic in his eyes when the judge referenced the recorded conversation. When the judge played the recording again, this time in full, the entire courtroom leaned forward. Emily's voice, calm yet calculating, echoed around the room, repeating instructions she had given Jason to manipulate me. Each word landed like a hammer, driving home the truth of her deceit. I felt my chest tighten briefly, not with anger, but with anticipation, knowing the moment of reckoning had arrived. Emily's hands clenched at her sides, her knuckles whitening. Her lips trembled slightly. She tried to interject, to argue, but the judge raised a hand, silencing her firmly. Jason's eyes widened as he realized the extent of what had happened. The trust he had placed blindly in Emily was crumbling before him. The weight of his mistake pressed down, and I saw him shrink under it. I allowed myself a slow, deliberate smile. This was it. Every insult, every eye roll, every laugh had led to this. Justice was not delivered with shouting or theatrics, but with calm precision, with patience, with truth. The humiliation they had tried to inflict on me now reflected back onto them, magnified by their own arrogance. The judge outlined the ruling, acknowledging the evidence, the manipulation, and the breach of trust. Emily's shoulders slumped completely, her gaze dropping to the table. There was no longer any fight in her, only the realization that she had underestimated me, underestimated the depth of my preparation, and underestimated the power of truth. Jason leaned back in his chair, a silent apology written across his face, a shame so profound that no words could repair it. I felt the weight lift from my chest. Relief surged through me in a wave, powerful and intoxicating. It was not just a legal victory, it was the emotional triumph. The validation of every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every ounce of patience I had poured into this moment. For years, I had been invisible in my own family, dismissed and underestimated. Now, the balance had shifted. Emily's smirk was gone. Her sharp, cutting words silenced permanently by her own evidence. Jason's confusion and guilt were tangible, a silent acknowledgement of how far they had strayed. The courtroom was still for a moment, the kind of silence that carries weight, the kind that lets the lesson sink in fully. I allowed myself a deep breath, feeling the tension drain from my shoulders. I looked at them both, not with rage, but with clarity. Justice had been served. Humiliation had found its rightful place. and I, Robert, had stood firm through it all. As I gathered my documents and prepared to leave, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Triumph did not need to be shouted. Satisfaction did not require vengeance beyond what was deserved. I had been patient, precise, and finally vindicated. The laughter that had once cut me to the bone was replaced with a quiet, undeniable truth. I had won. Outside the courtroom, the cold air hit my face. I inhaled slowly, savoring the freedom of release, the clarity of validation, and the profound relief of knowing that justice, at last, had found its way home. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and liberation. The tension that had coiled inside me for months, even years, had finally loosened. I had faced betrayal from the people I trusted most. I had been dismissed, mocked, and treated as if my existence did not matter. Yet here I was, standing upright, validated, my integrity intact. I realized in that moment that the greatest revenge is not in yelling, not in striking back impulsively, but in staying calm, patient, and precise until truth itself delivers justice. I thought about Emily, about her arrogance and manipulation. She had believed that charm and cunning could shield her from consequences. She had underestimated patience, preparation, and resolve. Watching her unravel was strangely satisfying, not because I enjoyed seeing someone falter, but because the universe had balanced itself in that quiet, undeniable way that feels almost sacred. Actions have consequences, and finally, those consequences had landed exactly where they belonged. Jason lingered in my thoughts as well. My own son, who had been drawn into deception so completely, had a moment of clarity too. I could see that he now understood the weight of his choices, the consequences of following someone blindly without considering morality or truth. It pained me to see his regret, but it also reminded me that lessons are often learned through discomfort. He had seen the cost of manipulation, and perhaps now he would choose differently in the future. I realized that all the pain, all the frustration, had taught me something profound about resilience. Life has a way of testing us, of placing people in our paths who do not have our best interests at heart. These moments can crush a person, or they can refine them. I had chosen to let the injustice fuel me, not destroy me. I had transformed humiliation into strategy, anger into focus, and betrayal into an unshakable determination to claim what was rightfully mine. That is a lesson I will carry forever. Reflecting on the experience, I also understood the importance of boundaries. Love and trust are precious, but they are not unlimited. There is a point at which allowing mistreatment to continue is not noble, it is destructive. Protecting oneself, standing up for what is right, and demanding respect are not acts of selfishness. They are acts of survival and dignity. I had learned to define those boundaries clearly, and in doing so, I reclaimed not just assets, but my own sense of self-worth. I walked through the quiet streets after leaving the courthouse. The cold air stung my cheeks, and each breath reminded me that I had endured. I had endured the betrayal, the subtle jabs, the laughter, the dismissals. I had endured the uncertainty, the waiting, the tension that seemed unbearable at times. And now, with justice delivered, I felt something I had not felt in years. Relief, not fleeting relief, but a deep, grounding sense of closure that settled in my chest like a warm, steady weight. The story of this experience will stay with me forever. It is a reminder that patience, preparation, and moral clarity are more powerful than any insult or manipulation. Life will present challenges and people who will try to diminish us. Sometimes, the sweetest satisfaction comes not from revenge and anger, but from justice, executed with precision and integrity. I do not feel the need to celebrate loudly or to gloat. That is not who I am. Instead, I feel a quiet confidence, a sense of peace that comes from knowing I stood firm, I acted wisely, and I allowed truth to reveal itself. I have learned, I have grown, and I have been vindicated. And in the stillness of that cold January afternoon, I understood finally that integrity, patience, and resilience are far more powerful than anger, deception, or manipulation.